Hey guys, MetalJesus here. Lately I've been doing a lot of traveling and taking my PlayStation Vita with me pretty much everywhere. And so in this video, I want to share with you 9 hidden gems games you might want to check out on your PlayStation Vita as well. Let's take a look. Before we get started, I do want to mention that not all these games are going to be exclusive to the Vita. As you guys probably know, the Vita wasn't very successful in the United States, and so it makes sense that game developers would probably want to publish them to the Switch or PC as well. So I'll put that information in the title card for each game.
We're going to start with a game that I go back to time and time again, and that is Air Race Speed. This is a futuristic racing game where the entire point of it is to navigate these tight, twisting and turning corridors as fast as possible. Unlike other games, there are no enemies in this, not even other racers to compete with, just a crazy sense of speed and the desire to get that elusive best time. Thankfully, the controls are very tight in this game, as you'll need to be extremely precise with your flying to not crash into obstacles, which, if you do that, that's going to knock off a little bit of your time for your run. I like how there's an endless amount of boost that you can use in this game, which in the beginning, you're going to want to use that kind of sparingly, because while you can improve your race times by using boost, until you actually learn the nuances of that track, it can almost be a little bit too fast at the start. I originally played this game on the Nintendo 3DS, and while this game is great on that handheld, here on the Vita, the resolution's a little higher, the texture is just a little bit more clear, and the game is still fun as heck. I really like this game. I mean, it's got a simple premise, but it does it very well. Next up is Chaos Rings. This is an old school RPG series from Mediavision and is published by Square Enix. Now, this was originally released on iOS, that's where I originally played the game on my iPad, but it was later ported to the Vita as well as Android phones. And all 4 games are actually released on the Vita, and these are perfect for fans of the original PlayStation era of Japanese RPGs like Final Fantasy and also Wild Arms. By default, the first game will display Japanese text, but you can easily switch that to English for the entire game. However, I do need to warn you that the third game in the series, I think, only came out in Japan, so just beware if you're going to play that game. The third one, you do need to get the English patch. This game is about an all-powerful being that kidnaps humans to fight in his deadly Ark arena. Now, this game's plot is kind of convoluted. It involves time travel, parallel universes, but you don't really have to care about that to get some enjoyment out of this game. But basically what he does is pairs you up with another NPC in combat. And so what you do is at the beginning of every turn in combat, you have to choose if you're going to be fighting solo or as a pair. As you might expect, fighting solo isn't going to do as much damage to your enemy, but it also limits the attacks from the enemy to just one person. If you choose to fight as a pair, well, the attacks are going to be more devastating, but then both of you will take damage, basically making you choose, between risk and reward. However, it adds a tension to those battles if you choose pair, so you need to make sure that both of you can survive any incoming group damage. And being that this game comes from people who worked on Wild Arms and being published by Square, well, you know that it's going to have characters that are well thought out and are very interesting. Some of these characters are actually fairly complex and always not really pleasant to be around, yet they have a depth written into them. Admittedly, these graphics do look a little dated, especially if you're watching this video on, say, a larger, big screen TV. But trust me, they look great if you're playing it on the smaller Vita screen. All of the games in the Chaos Rings series were really well reviewed when they were released at the time, and the Vita version is the only physical version that I know of. So I'm very glad to see them, preserve these games on the Vita for all time. Next up is something completely different. It is a game called Ice Cream Surfer. Basically, this game is what people call a horizontal cute-em-up, or, a cute shoot-em-up. I guess this is based on an online comic series where there's this evil broccoli bad guy and his army of healthy vegetables get in a food fight with people who are sugar-loving heroes. And as you can see by this footage, it is full of bright colors based on food. There's also lovable animals and really weird flying objects. There's a real sense of whimsy about this game, which is what I like about it. And while initially you may think that this is easier than most games in the genre, but don't be fooled, as this game can suddenly get very tough very quick. It plays a little bit like Parodius, where the enemies turn into collectibles when you shoot them. I do really like shooters, and so this is right up my alley. Now, admittedly, it's not the best shoot 'em up that you'll ever play, but I do like its visual style, so I'm willing to look past a few warts. Here is 99 Vitas, or 99 Lives in Portuguese, and as you can see here, it is a retro-inspired, side-scrolling beat-em-up similar to, I'd say, Double Dragon, or Final Fight, or Streets of Rage. There is a story here. Basically, it deals with this device called the 99 Vitas. It's got elemental powers, and in this game you have 6 playable characters, as well as 5 unlockable characters as you play the game, each with their own speed, strength, as well as that elemental alignment. So for instance, the character I'm playing right now is water-based, and so he has special attacks that are associated with water. You can play this game in co-op mode, up to 4 players, both online and local, which should definitely please beat-em-up fans like my buddy Reggie. And as you can see by the graphics, this game looks and plays really great. I mean, there's some high-quality stuff here. Now, some people have complained that the 3 to 4 hour main story can be a bit short, but honestly, I think that is just perfect for a game of this type. I'll admit, there are a lot of these retro-style beat-em-ups, but there's some real fun to be had here, and occasionally it has made me laugh out loud. Definitely check it out. Here's a game called Knytt Underground. This game originally launched on the PlayStation 3 as well as the Vita, and as you can see here, it's a 2D platforming Metroidvania style game, but it's different than a lot of others because in this game you don't have a weapon. Instead, it's more about pure exploration and discovery. You'll talk to NPCs and get information about the world, or take on quests that will unlock the path forward. And you'll immediately notice that this is a very story and character driven game. Surprisingly so for a game like this, right? I mean, the main plot has you trying to stop an Armageddon, but it also deals with religion and superstition in really surprising ways. And this is a massive game at over 1,800 rooms to explore, many of those secret or hidden. Now, admittedly, it does take a little bit of time to get used to the controls, especially because the character auto jumps when you get off the ledge. It's kind of a small thing, but I wanted to mention it because for a while, it really drove me nuts that the character would do that. But once you get used to it, it's okay. It's going to take you a little over 10 hours to complete this game, especially with so many secrets and also multiple endings. So you can easily push that into the 20-hour mark if you are a completionist. Next up is Spy Chameleon. As the title suggests, you play as a chameleon that can change its colors to blend into the background, trying to get from one end of the level to the next. Robots, cameras, and more will be out to detect you, and if discovered, well, you're going to need to start the level all over again. Basically, this plays like a top-down Metal Gear game, but with the color-changing ability of the chameleon, well, that plays a huge role in this game. Like Metal Gear, you can see those vision cones, and that's what you need to basically avoid. However, like when blended into, say, a colored red rug, for example, well, you're basically invisible unless you actually get bumped into. You can also knock over a can of paint, which will spread a color on the floor, which then you can hide in. And this is another big game at over 75 levels, which are really going to test your stealth abilities. And I do love a well-designed stealth game, so this is one that I come back to on the Vita time and time again. Next up is Volgarr the Viking. This is an indie game that is heavily inspired by the arcade classic Rastin. Originally, it was a Kickstarter project that was made with support of fans who were looking for a game that would pay tribute and also keep that old school arcade difficulty. Well, let me tell you, they succeeded because this game, oh man, you will die. You will die a lot. The developers who made this also worked on games like Shinobi 3D for the 3DS. They also worked on Spider-Man Web of Shadows for the DS and more. So they definitely have the programming chops. And you'll notice that the first level here is almost a one-to-one recreation of the first level of Rastin, so they are massive fans of that game. It has great graphics, great controls, and yeah, it has that old school difficulty too. Check it out. Here's a game called Chasm, and this is another Metroidvania style 2D platforming game, but I think it's a step or two above the rest. The game is taking inspiration from Castlevania, but it also mixes in procedurally generated levels and also some handcrafted sections too. I read that the developer took 6 years to make this game and get it just right, making sure that all of that worked as a cohesive experience. Combat is very much like Castlevania, and it's going to feel right at home with fans of that series because you have a main weapon and also sub-weapon, and just how the game feels, again, you can tell they're very inspired by Castlevania. As you explore, you're going to unlock townspeople that are trapped in the caverns, and then what you do is you send them back to the surface. So now they're either going to have a shop that you can use, or maybe they'll unlock a new side mission for you. When it comes to Metroidvania style games, Chasm typically does show up in the top 10, and it's easy to see why. And I know a lot of people played it on other platforms, and so I went back and forth as to whether I would include it in a Hidden Gems video, but I do think that a lot of people forget it got a Vita release. I think on the Vita, it's probably a little less known, and so I wanted to include it here because it is awesome. And here's another game that might be a little controversial for a Hidden Gems list, and that is Resogun. Resogun is a twin-stick shooter that really showed off the power of the PlayStation 4 when it launched, but I don't think a lot of people know that there was a specific Vita port for this game. And there are a couple cool things that make this game special. The first one being that it has this beautiful voxel technology, this technology which uses these little building blocks instead of just pixels. And so when you shoot things and they blow up, well, they break apart in all of these voxels. It's so cool looking. Another thing that's kind of unique about this game is that it has this cylindrical level design. So it's almost like classic Defender, but you can see the entire level all the time. And like Defender, you need to protect and rescue humans when they are abducted by the enemies. And for the most part, the game runs really well on the Vita. Now, it's not running at 60 frames a second like it did on the PlayStation 4, but I think it looks and plays great. And like all good shooters, boss battles are some of my favorite parts of this game as well. And so while Resogun is definitely known on the PlayStation 4, I did want to include the Vita version right here because I don't hear it talked about a lot, and it's fantastic. So there you go, guys. That is 9 more hidden gems you can play on your PlayStation Vita. And the truth is, there were a lot more games released for the Vita than most people realize. It was actually a really well-supported system, especially when it comes to indie releases. And admittedly, I have just barely scratched the surface here. There are a ton of games that came out on the Vita, and, you know, thankfully they also got to live on PC, on Switch, things like that. But as you guys know, I'm a massive fan of the PlayStation Vita, and I'm always looking for an excuse to pick it up and play it again. And so if you have some hidden gems that people need to check out on their Vita, I would love to hear about it in the comments down below. And as always, guys, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.